What if I told you that the most feared warriors in medieval Europe weren't just savage fighters, but were actually consuming a cocktail of deadly drugs that turned them into unstoppable killing machines? Fighters who felt no pain, showed no mercy, and literally bit through their own shields in battle-ready fury. The Viking Berserkers weren't just tough soldiers, they were chemically enhanced super warriors whose terrifying rituals and mind-altering substances created legends. So dark that Christian monks refused to write about them for centuries. What they did to their enemies before, during and after battle will make your blood run cold, because these weren't just raiders. They were practitioners of ancient shamanic traditions that involved consuming fly agaric mushrooms, alcohol, and possibly even human blood to enter a trance so violent they would attack trees, rocks, or even their own comrades if no enemies were available. Archaeological evidence uncovered in recent decades reveals burial sites where berserker warriors were found with their teeth filed to sharp points, their bones showing signs of repeated self-inflicted wounds and ritual scars that suggest they cut themselves as part of battle preparation. But here's what's truly shocking. These weren't random acts of violence. Berserkers followed a specific religious practice dedicated to Odin, the All-Father, who was associated with madness, death, and the wild hunt. To become a berserker meant undergoing initiation rituals that would drive most people insane, starting with isolation in the wilderness for months, living like wolves, eating raw meat, sleeping in the open, and gradually losing all connection to human society until they no longer distinguished themselves from the wild animals they emulated. The word berserker comes from the Old Norse bear shirt or bear shirt. While many believe this refers to wearing bear skins into battle, recent linguistic research suggests it might actually mean they fought completely naked. Their bodies painted with symbols and covered in ritual scarification that told the story of every enemy they'd killed, every village they'd burned, and every oath they'd sworn to Odin in exchange for supernatural strength and immunity to weapons. But the most disturbing part isn't their appearance or even their drug use, it's what happened to their minds during battle. Eyewitness accounts from Christian chroniclers describe berserkers entering a state called berserker gang, where they foamed at the mouth, howled like wolves or bears, bit their shields and weapons, and became so consumed with rage that they continued fighting even after receiving wounds that should have been fatal. Some continuing after losing limbs, being pierced by multiple spears, or having their throats partially cut. Byzantine Emperor Constantine VII wrote about encountering Viking berserkers in the 10th century, describing them as men who had given up their humanity, noting they seemed to feel no pain in battle. This led to speculation they had discovered natural anesthetics that allowed them to ignore even the most severe injuries. But modern analysis of medieval texts and archaeological evidence suggests something far more complex and terrifying. These warriors were systematically destroying their own nervous systems through repeated exposure to toxic substances and extreme physical trauma, essentially turning themselves into living weapons who could no longer function in normal society. The fly agaric mushrooms they consumed contain muscimol and ibotenic acid, compounds that cause hallucinations, increased pain tolerance, and episodes of uncontrollable rage. Berserkers learned to combine these with alcohol fermented from honey and various herbs to create a psychoactive cocktail that kept them in a violent trance for hours. Some sources even suggest they consumed small amounts of mercury and other heavy metals, causing permanent brain damage, explaining why many were described as mad even outside of battle, unable to form normal relationships or participate in regular Viking life, existing only as weapons. What makes this even more disturbing is that becoming a berserker wasn't a choice made by desperate men or social outcasts. It was a prestigious position that required years of training and preparation. Young men from prominent families volunteered, to undergo the transformation because berserkers were rewarded with treasure, land, and the respect of their communities. Despite the fact that the process would ultimately destroy their minds and bodies, leaving them as hollow shells of humanity who existed only to kill and die. Archaeological evidence from berserker graves shows that most died young, their skeletons bearing the marks of countless injuries, repeated fractures, and signs of chronic pain that must have made their daily lives unbearable. The Christian Church was so terrified of berserkers that it spread stories of them being possessed by demons or cursed by the devil. But the reality was worse. These were men who had voluntarily given up their humanity. Through chemical abuse, physical torture, and psychological conditioning that turned them into perfect killing machines. They were often employed as the personal bodyguards of Viking kings and jarls, meaning the most powerful leaders in Scandinavia were surrounded by chemically enhanced warriors who could snap at any moment and start killing everyone around them, friend or foe. The most chilling accounts come from the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, which describes a berserker attack on a monastery in Northumbria. The warriors didn't just kill the monks, they performed elaborate rituals with the bodies, arranging them in patterns suggesting some kind of religious ceremony. Several berserkers were found days later, still alive but completely catatonic, sitting among the corpses and staring blankly into space, having apparently burned out their nervous systems so completely they could no longer move or speak, yet were somehow still breathing and aware of their surroundings, trapped inside bodies that no longer responded to their will. But here's the most shocking revelation historians have recently pieced together from fragmentary sources and archaeological evidence. The berserker tradition didn't end with the Viking Age. Documented cases of similar warrior cults appeared throughout medieval Europe, including the Irish Fianna, the Germanic Ulfhednar, and even certain knightly orders during the Crusades, who adopted modified berserker practices. This suggests that knowledge of how to create chemically enhanced super warriors spread far beyond Scandinavia and continued to influence European warfare for centuries. Some evidence even suggests that certain holy warriors during the Crusades used similar combinations of drugs and psychological conditioning to enter states of religious ecstasy that made them nearly unstoppable in battle. And the reason this information has been suppressed for so long, because the Church systematically destroyed any records that might reveal the true extent of these practices, fearing that the knowledge of how to create berserkers might spread and undermine the authority of Christian civilization itself. The berserker story is a powerful reminder of how history often hides dark and complex truths behind legends. Their legacy lives on in the historical record, but their true nature was buried by the Church for centuries. If you found this interesting or learned something new, hit the like button so others can discover these hidden stories too, and feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below.